Jacovidis.
What can you tell me about Danae? What do you remember about Danae in any capacity? I mean,
Danae, I never knew what kind of mood he was in.
yeah.
So you would approach him and just pray that he wasn't going to snap at you or something.
Oh, yeah.
Because he was known to do that.
Yeah.
He was very, very good. You know, I mean, I worried about him as the years went by because I didn't know what else he knew to do.
Right.
But then he had that magic scratch ticket, which saved his life.
Right.
You know, as far as I'm concerned, I was very, very happy that happened.
Yeah, I'm still waiting for mine.
Yeah, I'm still waiting for mine too.
Yeah.
But when I saw that he had hit the jackpot, I was really, really happy because like I said, I worried.
Right, because DJing is not a really reliable way to make a living, especially to plan for retirement or any of that.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And I always had a day job somewhere.
Yeah. So even when you were at the 12, did you, or not for those heydays? You probably didn't, right?
At the 12, I didn't have a day job, but by the time I got to Metro. Well, I didn't really need a day job then.
Yeah, because that was a pretty good gig, right?
But from Styx, I went to Boston. It was still Boston then, but it was just about to close down to remodel.
Right, and that's 15 Lansdowne Street.
15 Lansdowne Street.
Boston.
Right next to Spit, which is 17 Lansdowne Street.
Right, so then it became Metro in what year?
I'm going to say 1980-ish.
Yeah. So now what's happening around that time is that the Disco Sucks movement has already started to happen, right?
Right.
So how did you guys handle, I know that everybody's talked about how they handle it in various ways by having to get their records from sometimes Europe by then. Yeah. That's just become more common, right?
At that particular time, imports were really the best songs that we had to introduce to the crowd. But they were expensive.
Yeah.
You know, you'd be paying $12 to $15 just for
one 12-inch.
For one 12-inch with hopefully two good sides.
Right.
Yeah, but it didn't matter to us then.
When did you first join the record pool, and were you you must have been a Billboard reporter as well?
I was a Billboard reporter later.
Okay.
But I was one of the first ones at the Boston Record Pool. Their first office, I believe, was in Kenmore Square.
Yeah.
And run by Roxy Mizell and John Luongo.
Right. Yeah, John's somebody who I would love to talk to.
Yeah.
Right? I see him on Facebook. I see his posts all the time on Facebook, and he's got so much to share.
I know, doesn't he?
And he's got such an interesting insight into what's happening now versus then. And of course, his name is all over.
Right.
So many classics and everything.
Yeah.
So.
Well, he did a lot of production.
Yeah.
And remixing.
Sure.
Yeah.
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 So he's somebody I'd like to. I mean, I know he lives in New York, right? I believe.
No, he lives in Hilton Head, South Carolina.
Oh, he does. Okay.
Yeah.
I always thought he moved to New York and stayed there. I just have to. I would love to try and get to talk to him someday because he probably knows a lot about the early days. When did he leave Boston? Do you remember them?
I do not remember because I think I probably left before him.
You did.
Yeah.
Okay. So the record pool, Disco Sucks. Record pool's not servicing very good disco records by a certain point, right? Is that what ends up happening? Is the major labels kind of just don't wash their hands of the whole thing?
Either that, or in that particular time span, let's just say 2 weeks, because you want to get some new music in there every 2 weeks, some really good stuff. Because there was a lot of good stuff coming up. The whole Disco Sucks thing, I don't think really affected Boston. In my eyes, it didn't affect Boston. I was like, oh, those people in Chicago are nuts anyway.
Right.
So,
right.
You know, burning up vinyl, really? For what?
Right.
You know, what a mess.
Right. And of course, since then, we found out that it did have homophobic and racist kind of undertones to it.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, all that stuff. But it didn't affect you guys because you were still just finding the music wherever you had to find it and playing it and just carrying on. Of course, house music ends up kind of getting birthed out of that to some degree, right?
I mean, there was a lot of good music coming out, so I just kind of turned my head the other way with the Disco Sucks thing.
Yeah. Did your style change over the years, or did you did you have a particular style right away that you kind of stuck to and you made different music fit into that style, or how did that work for you?
My shtick was vocals.
Yeah.
I played primarily vocals, and And there was so much good stuff coming out then.
Sure.
You know, you didn't even really need to go and buy the import, but you had to buy the import because if somebody else was playing it somewhere else and they asked you if you would play it, you know, on a later date or whatever, then you wanted to be prepared.
Right.
If it was good.
Right.
And I generally wouldn't play something that I really didn't like.
Yeah.
And it never really came back to hit me in the face. One song did, though, Rapper's Delight.
Yeah.
I threw that off the Mass Ave Bridge into the Charles. I just got so sick of it.
But it blew up. But you played it.
I did play it.
Yeah, but you didn't really like playing it.
Hated it.
Yeah. Yeah. How about other records that have sort of become like almost cliches at this point, like It's Raining Men and stuff like that? I mean,
Born to Be Alive. I loved it. Born to Be Alive.
Yeah.
Love Born to Be Alive.
Yeah.
Shame, Evelyn Champagne King.
But things like I Will Survive and It's Raining Men. I mean, you guys. I mean, Val told me that he knew those were going to be huge right away. Yeah. And so, did you get tired of them at a certain point? I mean, did they have a shelf life that went on and on and on and on to the point where you got tired of them?
They had a shelf life of a really long time. And generally, I was sick of them after playing them for like a month.
But you'd keep playing them anyway?
If people wanted to hear it.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. Let's talk about what your desires as a DJ versus your crowd's desires. Because I run into this a lot where I feel like I really want to indulge them and say, okay, I really want to play something else right now, but I know if I play this, they're going to go crazy for it.
You had to go with your crowd, you know? Yeah. And the booth was so accessible at Metro. Yeah. You know, they could walk up those stairs to the bar and practically put their arm over and just, you know, hold their hand on a record if they really wanted to. That was kind of scary sometimes. Yeah. You see a face pop up.
So the Metro was a big room, right?
Metro was a huge room.
It was what eventually became Avalon and all that. Yeah. So it was the capacity was like what, 1,000, something like that.
I think it was a couple thousand. Yeah. But they easily fit 4,000.
Yeah, as many as they could.
Night.
So this is a big deal for you. I mean, to go to Metro, you're playing for what? The biggest crowd you ever played for?
At that time, it was the largest club in New England.
Yeah.
At that point.
All right, and you were there on every Sunday?
I was there every single Sunday after Jeff Tilton left.
Okay, so Jeff was there first.
Yeah.
And it was pretty well established when Jeff was there as a place to be on Sunday, right?
Oh, it was the place to be on Sunday.
And it was where people went post tea dance. Was there a tea dance that people went to first? Was
Not
there
that
even
I
one
know
yet?
of in Boston. No.
No, so they weren't even doing one at Chaps yet.
No. Well, maybe at Chaps.
Yeah, because there was that sort of dynamic where people would go to tea dance first, and they would go to 15 Lansdowne Street after whatever incarnation.
And there'd be a line from the front door all the way up to Brookline Avenue, hooking around over the Mass Pike into Kenmore Square.
Wow.
Yeah, half an hour easily. The room was completely full, packed, and where the DJ booth was, right below, there was double doors that led out to the train tracks along the Mass Pike. Right. And on really, really, really crowded nights, it would get so hot in there, they would have to open those doors, and the amps were behind me, and they would all go out, and all you'd be hearing is, you know, tinny stuff, and we would grab a record and start fanning the amps. And then they'd come back on, and the music and the bass would pop in, boom, and they would go crazy, just crazy. You would have thought that someone had done the funniest thing in the world,
or that it was like an early experiment with like filters or something like that, right? Like you were actually filtering out the bass and then bringing it back, or
it was crazy. It was crazy. Yeah, and those are the nights that were really crowded. Yeah, really, 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 really crowded.
Yeah. So it must have felt really good, though. I mean, to know that you were trusted with this.
It was a trip. I know. I was in control. Yeah. I created whatever the mood was on the dance floor through the music. Yeah. And believe me, I was grateful for all that back then. I was like, you know. Yeah. And they made it clear my job was not up for, you know, anybody else, any dibs.
They were behind you. They had the back.
They totally had.
And was this wasn't the Lyons Brothers yet, was it?
Yes.
It was then.
When it was Boston, John Addison owned it, and when in the changeover, Patrick Lyons bought it. Okay. With his two brothers, Michael and John.
Okay, how were they to work for?
They were great to me.
Yeah.
I didn't really like John Lyons, but we used to call him Big Bad John.
Yeah. Temper, mood.
He doesn't like gay people.
That's funny, right?
And they made so much money on Sunday nights, but he had a real aversion to people that were gay.
Yeah.
So
that probably played out. That dynamic probably played out all over the city and all over the country.
Yeah.
At a certain point, right?
Yeah.
Because I mean, the mob owned a lot of places, right?
Yeah. They still owned a lot of places in P-Town at that time.
Yeah.
Like the Crown and Anchor.
Right. So actually, let's talk about P-Town, because when did you start playing in P-Town? Was it around the same time? Were you dividing your time between Boston and P-Town?
No, I would just go to P-Town to fill in.
Okay.
This was long before I lived there.
Okay.
Like if Jackie Mack wanted to take a night off, rest her soul.
Yeah.
So I was only there maybe once a week.
Yeah.
You know, and I would bring my records on the ferry.
Yeah.
Those records were so heavy.
Heavy, I know, right? People who talk about vinyl now, I kind of go, listen, I don't miss lugging those crates around.
No.
A controller and a laptop, believe me, I can do a million things with this.
And yes, it does sound better on vinyl.
Yeah.
Live. But you know what? How many people really listen to the music?
First of all, they don't, but arguably, if you say it sounds better on vinyl, that's only if the system's been sort of set up and tuned for vinyl.
Right.
I mean, a lot of them have been set up for digital music anyway, so
Right.
if you bring in turntables and play vinyl on that system, there's no guarantee it's going to sound
No.
better.
No.
In fact, it might sound worse.
Right.
So, I mean, the reality is that a lot of places just aren't set up for vinyl anymore anyway.
Fortunately, it was still all vinyl.
Sure.
Back then, when I was spinning.
When you played vinyl, though, I mean, how much did you do besides just beat matching and segueing between records? I mean, because you had started with 45, so you probably had to know how to create your own breaks and intros and outros, right? With
Yep.
like 2 copies of something
Yep,
and all that kind of stuff.
Or a lot of times you'd find the vocal on one side, and on the flip side was the instrumental. Yeah.
So you learned how to do your own sort of like on the fly mixing, almost producing
Yeah.
live in the DJ booth, right?
Yeah.
But when the 12-inch comes along, you don't have to do it as much, right? Because a lot of it's done for you as far as intros and outros. But you guys still did a lot of experimenting with 2 copies of records and all that.
We would. But the 12-inch provided a longer intro and a longer outro.
Right.
Generally, the song was just longer.
Yeah.
Which made it good, again, for going to the bathroom.
Yeah, sure.
You know, I mean, this was a big thing. When Jeff Tilton was playing at Boston, I remember he had a canteen in the booth, and he would go into the canteen.
Yeah.
You know?
You had to do it.
Yeah, we couldn't do it then with me.
No, right, of course, it was not the same.
No.
So you are at Boston for how many years?
From 80...
I mean, Metro, excuse me.
80, from 77 to 86.
Okay. And when do you move to P-Town?
First I moved to Charlotte, North Carolina, and the club scene down there wasn't great, but I was on the radio a lot. I did traffic reporting. I did a lot of different jobs at Charlotte.
Was this in 86 after you left?
I left in 87 for, yeah.
What brought you down there? Was it
a woman?
Yeah. It usually is, right? It's usually,
Yes.
yeah, something like that. Yeah.
And when I left Charlotte, I moved to Miami Beach, but then, right after then, I moved to Boston.
You moved back
I didn't
to
stay in
Boston.
Miami Beach that long, maybe a year or 2.
Yeah, but Metro was your primary gig then, right? While you were here until 86?
Metro was my primary gig, yeah.
And then you filled it in P-Town occasionally?
Filled in P-Town occasionally. I worked for Rick Murray at Crown and Anchor, and he actually would fly me up, you know, from wherever I was living at the time to spin for couple gigs during a week, like Carnival Week, Bear Week, those things.
Right.
But
so South Carolina, then Miami, and you didn't like Miami Beach?
I did like Miami Beach, but there was so much cocaine everywhere that I wanted to get away from it.
Yeah. Did you?
And I knew that the only way I was going to get away from it was to leave
the
area.